All right, everybody. Welcome to the U.S. Term Limits live Facebook broadcast. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Howdy, howdy.
Good afternoon from Arizona.
My name is Ken Quinn, Regional Director with U.S. Term Limits. And, gentlemen, why don't you introduce yourselves and let everybody know where you are today? Well, you just said that, Ron, so we know you're in Arizona. How's the weather there?
Look, it's warm, but it's great weather here, and we're looking out to the western states. Special guest today is Aaron.
Special guest, Mr. Aaron Dukette.
Hello, hello. Yeah, I'm Aaron Dukette, and I am down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Alabama. Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And it is also really nice down here today, and moving progress of the U.S. Term Limits resolution through the legislature here.
Yeah, so we got some exciting news for everyone that's been following this, and we're going to have Aaron get to that in just a minute. But before we jump into the nitty gritty, I want to thank everybody out there in Facebook land for joining us. If you have not been following U.S. Term Limits for a while, I'm just going to kind of give you a quick overview of what we're all about. And this effort is, we are working on it's a very difficult work, but we're going to get it done. We are trying to put term limits on Congress, and the way it has to be done is through an amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And for those of you that may not be familiar with Article 5, there's only two ways to propose amendments. Either 2/3 of both houses of Congress needs to propose it and then have the states ratify it by three quarters, which is 38 states. Or the second method of proposing is if we get 2/3 of the state legislatures to pass a resolution, then they can have a meeting to propose the amendment and then have the states ratify it the same way. So that's what we're working on. We're actually advancing it both ways, but we really believe that the only way to get this completely done is through the states. And so oftentimes when we talk about this, I haven't seen it yet, but usually somebody will say, well, let's vote on it. In fact, I saw some comments on a few posts the other day. It's like, let the people vote on it. And I wish we could, everybody, but we can't. We did that in the 1990s, 23 states. I think 21 of them voted for it at the ballot box, overwhelmingly supported it. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court of the United States overturned all of those state laws. And they ruled the only way we can get this done is with an amendment under Article 5. So that's where we're at. And Aaron, why don't you kind of jump in and share with us what's going on in Louisiana so folks can get caught up here?
You bet, Ken. So, we're down here in Baton Rouge. The U.S. Term Limits resolution is active in several states in particular. We've been really cruising here in Louisiana. We have a special 30-day session in Louisiana, and got kind of pushed out because of COVID-19 and things being just upside down in the year 2020. And so we've been cruising through. Earlier this week, we passed the floor of the Louisiana House by a count of 67 to 18. So it's a very, very high percentage of the vote on the back of very strong bipartisan support, which really, is a credit to the House for mirroring the sentiments of the people of Louisiana. Louisianans say that 85% of them want this resolution passed. So they're right up there with them and delivering what's promised. So we need to make sure that the Senate does the same thing too, so that we can get a step closer to term limits on Congress. So here we are and rolled over to the Senate. We passed one chamber. We got to pass both, of course, in order to pass a state. And we have just moments ago been referred over to the Senate Government Committee, and we will be on the agenda tomorrow. So we're in it and going for it, and I'll be here testifying for the resolution to get this thing through and get on to the House floor.
The Senate floor, actually. Yeah.
Got a Senate floor, yes.
Yeah. This thing's moving really fast, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Well, it ought to be even faster because the people are overwhelmingly in support of this thing. It's a common sense measure for the Joe on the street. When you talk to somebody, you want to wear a term limits hat or a T-shirt, you'll make 6 friends when you go out to go get your groceries. People want to see this happen. It doesn't matter your political ideology at all. People want to see this reform happen, and we got to make sure that our folks at the state legislatures want the same. So that's what we're pushing for, and we feel very optimistic we can get this thing done.
Yeah, and that's why we need all of you folks out there around the country. This really needs to come from the people. We can only go so far, and we want to thank all of the staffers that have been working on this in Louisiana. This is a all hands on deck effort, and tomorrow is a big day for us because the Senate hearing, hopefully it will pass again out of that Senate hearing, and then on to the Senate floor probably early next week. I don't know what day you think it could happen, but this is huge and we need this win. This is really critical for our effort. And so anything that you folks can do in your state to get it introduced, if it hasn't been introduced already, if you know legislators, please let them know, get them on board with sponsoring this model language resolution. It's very simple. And we have pledges that we are asking candidates to sign and legislators to sign that they will support this. And so it's got to come from you guys out there. We can only take this so far. Right, Ron? You know what it's like out in your states.
Well, we have some critical races, and we've really started to back some challengers that support term limits against incumbents that have been dinosaurs and been in there way too long. And so when you see those races in your states, we have some very competitive races coming up. Make sure that you reach out, especially when you live in those districts and you have one of your legislator is not supporting. You can't imagine the power of a note from you to your legislator. And we make that real easy for you. So go to our website and we'll show you how to make that real simple to do.
Yeah, and if I can jump in too, just if there's any folks that are watching here in Louisiana, an example, we can really use your help right now. We got a little special project. If you have 20 minutes of your time in the next week that you can give us to volunteer in a very small and very easy way to make this happen, it can make a huge impact. I would encourage you just simply send an email to our regional director, Ken Clark, kclark@termlimits.com, and we'll be in touch with you and we'll tell you what to do. So.
Yeah, and if you haven't signed our petition, go to termlimits.com and sign the petition. That's really critical because like today I was sending you some information, Aaron. What we do with that is we provide a list, like Aaron's going to deliver a document that shows this senator everybody in his district who supports this. And so that really helps when we're in the field and we're meeting with legislators to be able to hand them a document and they see all the names of the people in their district that want this. Because you've seen what happens. You hand them that document, they stop talking to you and they just start looking at the names. And they're like, oh, I know that person. I know that person. And that's really, really powerful. And that's what we need. So that's what we use the petition for. And we also use it, obviously, it's great that you're joining us on Facebook, but our main form of communication is email. And so by signing that petition, you'll receive not only our national emails, but also our state call to action emails, like what Aaron and Ken are doing in Louisiana.
That's right.
So it's really critical because if you want this, you got to do more than just make a comment on our Facebook page. You've got to sign the petition and you've got to participate in these calls to action. They are critical.
Aaron, what we do with if you
that threw me off, Ron. Anyway, so hey, one of the things we want to share, and we hear this all the time, is what's stopping this from happening? And Aaron, do you want to share a little bit about some of the opposition stuff that's going on in Louisiana?
Oh, sure. For example, so just to set the table here, term limits is not a right or left issue. It transcends partisan politics, and the polling bears that out state after state after state. It doesn't matter what party you are. It doesn't really matter your political ideology. It might shape a little bit your reasons for term limits, but everyone's got some reason they want term limits. And so we have fringe groups both on the left and the right, which are sort of strange bedfellows peddling the same myths and same lies, frankly, that get in the way and scare certain individuals into forbearing using the tool that the Constitution provides to do something like term limit Congress. So in particular here in Louisiana, what we have seen rear its head is an organization called Common Cause. If you look, they actually have a website that's sort of, in terms of its packaging, kind of misleading and tries to appeal to a different demographic and try to scare people away from supporting term limits on Congress through this use of Article 5. And they use a lot of lies. They say, oh, this thing is going to open the Constitution wide open, and it's going to, throw everything out, and everything's going to, be a total chaos. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. And frankly, it's a slander on the Constitution. And so knock it off is what I'm going to tell Common Cause. They pump in all kinds of emails, a lot of times from out of state, flood email boxes, throw out the scare tactics, and people are emotional beings, and so they get kind of thrown off sometimes. Well, I would just encourage anyone that's looking out there, take a look at Article 5 of the Constitution for yourself. Read it in plain language, and you tell me what it says. It's very clear. This is a convention for proposing amendments with a limited purpose. It's an ad hoc meeting to propose an amendment to the Constitution for term limits on Congress. And all it can do is propose. All it can do is suggest something, and then it's a proposal the entire time until the 38th state ratifies the thing. And then it's in the Constitution as part of this Constitution. There is nothing in Article 5 that talks about opening up the Constitution. It is never open whatsoever. It's passing a law. The Constitution wasn't open when we ratified all the other amendments that we've had. It was never open. That's the process. All it is that the states are doing it instead of Congress. It's time that our country wake up to this. We need to grow up past these lies, frankly, and take ownership of our country, because we're going to see time run out on using this thing. And so the time is now to take a step forward and do what's right.
Good job, Aaron. Yeah, man, I couldn't have said it any better, buddy. That's exactly right. And it's really shameful that these groups that claim to represent the people are prohibiting the very mechanism the framers gave us for their voice. And
Right.
That's what Article 5 is. Article 5 is the voice of the American people to help shape their government. I believe it's a government for the people, by the people, and of the people. Well, it's not if we can't make changes when we need to. And so that is why this is such a critical fight. So with that opening, what I want to do is I'm going to pull up some slides that I want to cover with you guys. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this the main screen. So your mics will still be on. We can kind of talk through this. Let me go to the beginning. So you talked about the tactics. And so this is what's going on, everybody. And we try to do a little education on this whole process because it's needed. There's so much misinformation out there that we really need to cover a lot of the truth and the history on this. And this is a quote I typically use all the time when I testify or I'm talking to legislators, because what Aaron was just talking about, the lies, the tactics, this is nothing new. This is exactly what the framers dealt with the Anti-Federalists during the ratification period. And let me just read this quote. The opponents, I expected, would endeavor to stamp it with unfavorable impressions, talking about the Constitution, in order to bias the judgment that is ultimately to decide on it. This is evidently the case with the writers in opposition, whose objections are better calculated to alarm the fears than to convince the judgment of their readers. They build their objections upon principles that do not exist, which the Constitution does not support them in, and the existence of which has been, by an appeal to the Constitution itself, flatly denied. And then, as if they were unanswerable, draw all the dreadful consequences that are necessary to alarm the apprehensions of the ignorant or the unthinking, end quote. So, that's exactly what you just talked about. They build their objections upon principles that do not exist, which the Constitution flatly denies. And that's what Article 5 does. And one of the biggest myths out there is this whole idea that this is a con, which is a constitutional convention. Like Aaron said, it can open up the Constitution and rewrite it. And so what we wanted to show you today, these are some groups on the left and the right that oppose Article 5, regardless of what the issue is. Even if it's a right-leaning or a left-leaning issue or policy, these groups still oppose it. And this is centered on budget and policy priorities. Every time I've testified, there's always been a representative there to oppose our resolution. This is from the League of Women Voters. They have opposed this from the very founding of their organization, I think back in the 60s. One of the loudest groups is the John Birch Society. All right. They have a huge campaign using fear of the Constitution to raise money for their organization, and it's really shameful. The next one we have is Eagle Forum, another group on the right. And if you notice, I kind of combined their screen here. There's a picture of Phyllis Schlafly with their poster child, Chief Justice Warren Burger, who they hold up as their supreme authority on Article 5, who never wrote a thing about Article 5 and was completely ignorant of it, even though he tried to make some comments on it and they take it out of context. And then the last one here is Common Cause that you're dealing with there in Louisiana. So these are the groups that oppose us and Article 5. And just to give you an idea, this is a letter that I found on the League of Women Voters that is a coalition letter of over 200 groups that have signed on to oppose the Article 5 process. So these are all left-leaning groups, apparently, and it's really a shame. So what I wanted to share with you is and we've been trying to do this every week, and I just want to take one point today. We're going to do a little myth busting on this whole idea of a con. And what I wanted to share with you is, well, let me go back to the 1787 Federal Convention real quick. On September 15th, the framers were finalizing the Constitution, and they just voted and unanimously approved putting the convention back into Article 5, okay, unanimously approved it. And immediately after that vote, a delegate from Connecticut, his name is Roger Sherman, made a motion to change Article 5, and he wanted to give it the power of a con. And let me prove that to you. This was immediately after that unanimous vote, and Mr. Sherman, quote, moved to strike out of Article 5 after legislatures the words, quote, of 3/4, unquote. And so after the word conventions, leaving future conventions to act in this matter like the present convention, according to circumstances, unquote. And so what that's referring to is the 3/4 ratification procedure. He wanted to eliminate the 3/4 requirement to make it a unanimous approval of the states, which would have made it exactly like the Articles of Confederation were. The Articles of Confederation required unanimous consent, and that was its biggest downfall because they were never able to amend it to fix problems because you could never get unanimous consent amongst the states. And so what that would have done, as Sherman said, it would leave Article 5 and give it the power as the Federal Convention had in 1787. And you know what the framers did? They rejected that motion. They voted it down 7-3 completely. So the framers voted against a con, okay? So this is where education is important. You know, these people go around talking like they know what they're talking about. And all you have to do is just read what the framers did and wrote and said about this, and you'll realize, oh my gosh, it's very clear. Article 5 clearly says a convention for proposing amendments that if it gets ratified, it will be added to this Constitution. There is no way it can open up or rewrite the Constitution. So when you hear people talk about a con, they are either completely ignorant of our history, or secondly, they have a motive. And typically that motive is to protect the establishment, to maintain the status quo for personal reasons. Those are the only two options: ignorance or motives. And so anybody that once they have been presented with the truth of Article 5, if they still believe it's a con, those are the only two options left. So that
Ken, when you say con, you want to elaborate on that term and how that term came
Constitutional
about?
Convention. Yeah. So it's a derogatory term of a constitutional convention. And when I say constitutional convention, I mean to draft a new constitution. Yeah. Thanks, Ron, for clarifying that. And what I wanted to show you. So this is really kind of cool, guys. So this was Roger Sherman at the Federal Convention. Okay. And it's kind of interesting. After that got defeated, I think he got kind of mad, and he actually, let's strike out Article 5 altogether. He was kind of upset, and that got defeated as well. But what's really unique about Roger Sherman, 2 years later, in 1789, when they were debating the Bill of Rights in Congress, he was now a member of Congress. And I want to show you, apparently he had been enlightened. This is on August 13th, 1789. And here's Mr. Sherman's quote. And this is what he says about Article 5 now at this point. He says this: all that is granted us by the 5th article is whenever we shall think it necessary, we may propose amendments to the Constitution, not that we may propose to repeal the old and substitute a new one. Isn't that beautiful?
Wow.
So the same guy that wanted to give Article 5 the power of a of a constitutional convention, completely understood afterwards, you can't do that. We made it clear you can only propose amendment. You cannot repeal and rewrite it. So in closing, I love,
this is my favorite diagram. This is a Quinn original.
So this is kind of helpful because this comes up all the time. I'm not going to go over all of this, but there are stark differences between a constitutional convention and an Article 5 convention. The purposes are different. Obviously, one's to draft a new constitution. The other is to propose amendments. And if you take it down at a micro level, the states do this all the time. Most states have had several constitutional conventions to adopt a new constitution. For instance, Louisiana, I've been studying Louisiana. They have had 11 constitutions. So 11 conventions to adopt a new constitution. Their last one was in 1973. And what's interesting is in 1992, they actually called a convention to propose an amendment to it. So they had a limited convention in 1992 to propose, I think, several amendments, but it was limited. So the biggest difference between a constitutional convention and Article 5 convention is this. A Article 5 convention only requires 2/3 of the states to call it and 3/4 of the states to ratify any amendment. A constitutional convention requires virtually unanimous consent amongst the states at every step of the way. At calling it, at passing it at the convention, it requires unanimous vote amongst the states at the convention as a whole and complete document, and then it requires unanimous consent of the states. Now, if a state does not ratify a new constitution, then they are not bound to it. And that's what happened in 1788. Once the 9 states put the new constitution into place by ratifying it, the remaining states were not bound to it until they ratified it themselves. Okay, so that's enough of history today. I don't want to overwhelm you guys out there, but this is kind of helpful for legislators, particularly who don't understand the process, so that they can really understand what they're voting on. So let me bring us back, gentlemen. Okay, so I hope that helped, but I love the Sherman motion for a con. Now you can tell people, listen, they voted against that, and you can show them right in the notes how they did it. So,
well, and Quinn, just there's a basic absurdity to the notion that Article 5 provides the means by which you can discard the entire Constitution. Why would they put that into the Constitution they just built? It's a never mind button. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You don't need the authority of the existing Constitution to write a new one, right?
Yeah, that's
It's
done
not- that's
outside of
perfect.
Article 5. Yeah.
It's not
Well,
perfect.
and they use several opportunities to remind people of that. Not only Sherman, but others throughout there. So it's such a ridiculous argument that it's tough for me to have much patience with anymore. It's really just a distraction because you can't get in. You know, when I run across it, they don't have a serious standing. They don't want to really discuss it at a serious level. It's just really a dodge more than anything. The big message here is the populace wants this, and we want it sooner than later.
Yeah. So don't fall for the con. Okay, that's our. I had another thought that escaped me. Oh well, that happens quite often during my days. But are there any questions that came up, guys, that you might have seen that I can quickly pull up and maybe we can address? I did see the comment about voting for it. If you came in late, we can't vote for it. The people cannot do this at the ballot box. It has to be done by the Constitution under Article 5. Jay, I liked your comment, man. I had to pull that one up. Let's see what else.
And by the way, that's just like the 22nd Amendment that limits the president. It needs to be done in the same way. It's all or nothing. It's pretty remarkable that 23 states decided to do that on their own. Just shows you the drive behind the populace for this. But the fact that it's all or nothing, I think that makes a lot of sense, and we're on our way.
Yeah, and the thing is, most people support term limits, and we have it at the governors. I think it was 34 governors in the states. We have it in 15 state legislatures. We have it down at municipality level. We've got it down to school boards. So this is something that's completely nonpartisan. It provides so many benefits to we the people. We have more choices. We get new people with fresh ideas. More people get to participate in government, which I think is really critical. Well, that's what we need. We need more individuals, especially in Washington, D.C., because it's become such a corrupt institution. And, when I hear somebody talk about institutional knowledge, oh my goodness. Okay, currently, this is what we have. I did the numbers.
It's like the knowledge you pick up in prison after you've been there about 10, 15 years. You don't go out as you're not going to go out and make an honest living after that. It's just not going to happen.
Here's your institutional knowledge. We currently have sitting in Congress right now 8,000 years of institutional knowledge. Now, how I get that is this. I looked at the tenure. The average tenure of members of Congress is 10 years. So you take the 535 members, you times it by 10 years. Then I took the numbers. 50% of Congress members have come from the state legislatures. And their average tenure is about 10 years as well. So when you combine their knowledge at the state level with their knowledge and tenure at the federal level, we have 8,000 years sitting in D.C. right now. And what's it getting us? Not a whole lot, boys.
Another day older and very much deeper in debt.
Yeah. So
there's not just one kind of experience that we need. We can get experience from all walks of life, all sectors of business, and all enterprises, not just being in Congress. It's not that specialized a talent set, let me tell you.
They're thick with attorneys, and you wonder why our laws have gone run amok. They purposely make these things impossible to understand so they can create more legal work. They're spinning this stuff up. And it's just amazing. You've got 9 attorneys for every accountant in Congress. So now do you wonder why we're screwed up like we are?
So, guys, before we go, I'm going to pull up our website to show people where they can go to get involved. Just so I got to try to remember that every time I get going on these rants, and I forget sometimes to do that. So let me just share my screen here real quick.
And while you're doing so, John Holden is asking how many states we need to get on board. So the answer to that number is 34 states. 2/3 of the states need to pass this resolution. And then all 50 states are invited to the table to do a proposal. So,
yes, 34. So let me move us out here. So here's our website, everybody. Make sure you go to our website, sign that petition. And up top, now, if you want to get involved and help us, there's a let's see, I think it's under Take Action. You can sign up to volunteer. Let us know how you'd like to help us. We have a variety of different ways that you can help us. We have current calls to action. And so please spend some time on our website and learn more about this, how you can help us. Reach out to us. We really need the help. And like I said, this has got to be a grassroots effort. The more people in the states that we can get on board to join us, that is how we're going to get this done. So thank you for asking, those of you that did. And thank you for those of you that have been helping us along the way. All right, gentlemen, anything else you'd like to address before we call it a wrap?
If you're in Louisiana, get involved. Drop an email to kclark@termlimits.com. We got a mission for you. Real simple. We need your help to get this across the finish line. So we're very optimistic, but we are going to need your help to get it through.
All right, Ron, any closing thoughts before I wrap it up?
Yeah, some near-term primaries in Utah. I've already went through Idaho. Happy to say that all but one of our challengers that signed the pledge made it in through the primary, so we're happy with that. Same thing's happening in Utah. Make sure you take a look and see where their standing is on term limits, and Arizona's right behind that. So we have a bunch of primaries coming up before the general election, so make sure that you pay attention.
All right. And Aaron, good luck tomorrow. Thank you for all you're doing down there in Louisiana for the people there of the state and for U.S. term limits and for the American people. And let's have a good day in Louisiana tomorrow and next week for a Senate vote and get this baby in the bucket. Get it passed. All right, everybody. Thank you for your time this afternoon, and we'll keep you informed, and we'll see you next week. Bye now.
Thanks all.